Well, much of northern Alberta is under evacuation orders or advisories due to wildfires burning out of control in their areas. Manitoba and Saskatchewan also have declared provincial-wide states of emergency as a result of wildfire. Ken McMullen is the president of the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs, and he's also the fire chief in Red Deer. Ken, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you very much.
We are seeing more and more evacuation alerts in northern Alberta right now. What is the situation there?
Yeah, I think that this is just an evolving, volatile situation where we are just seeing change after change at a moment's notice. Across Canada right now, we're seeing about 167 active wildfires, which is just a great deal, to be honest, in comparison to previous years. And to put that into perspective, about 32 of those are new within the last 18 to 24 hours. There's not a province or territory, with the exception of Prince Edward Island, across this country that isn't involved in some sort of fire activity. However, notably, we are seeing states of provincial declarations in Manitoba and Saskatchewan within the last few hours, and again, some new alerts in Alberta. So we're all in for quite a bit of work in the coming days.
What has made the last day or so hot or just so fiery across the country, really?
Yeah, I think that I'm not here to debate climate change one way or the other, but the reality is we had a lack of precipitation across this country over the majority of the 24 season, and now we're seeing record high temperatures in some communities. I was on a call with Manitoba last week, in fact, talking about a different item, and the radio indicated in the introduction that their temperature was 37 degrees. That plays just an absolute havoc on the ability to expose and extinguish wildfires. And so we're just seeing a lot of heat within our provinces and territories.
I mean, speaking about Manitoba specifically, Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew says that Prime Minister Mark Carney has offered some federal support. They've also asked for help from the Canadian Armed Forces. What do you think we need in Canada in order to be better prepared to fight these wildfires each wildfire season?
Yeah, we need to continue to have the conversation. We need to talk at the federal level about better coordination of efforts across the board. The Canadian Fire Chiefs will continue to advocate for the creation of a National Fire Administration, a position within the federal government that helps ensure that what happens in July isn't forgotten again in January. And I mean that quite literally. When we have the wildfires, I'll do interviews after interviews for multiple days while there's a wildfire going. We'll get commitment to look into different things. Yet, come September, October, November, snow flies, other priorities make the headlines in our newspapers, and we quickly forget about what we talked about in July and August. A National Fire Administrator makes sure that this is a topic of conversation 365 days a year, not only on wildfire, but on the multitude of issues that the fire service is dealing with, from lithium-ion batteries to affordable new homes, just to name a few.
Since that devastating fire in Jasper last year, were there lessons learned in terms of incorporating more Indigenous fire practices so then there aren't essentially trees that are standing ready to be kindling for the fire?
Yeah, I think that every time that we have major events, there's often something called an after-action review or an after-action report that gives recommendations, and those are all starting to come out, whether from the wildfire of 23 or the wildfires of 24s. We have to pay attention to those. We have to understand that we bring in individuals, consultants into our communities to make recommendations, and it's incumbent upon us to look at those recommendations and see what we can do as a country. I know that this country, and I commend the government for doing so, have invested in some important things. We've invested in some more additional training for wildland-urban interface firefighting. We've invested as a country into fire smarting and giving opportunities for residents to apply for funding to make their homes more fire smart. We need more of that. We need to continue to be at the table having those conversations to make these available for Canadians.
We recently did a deep dive into what a wildfire response would be here in the city of Edmonton, and we found out that the city itself does not have its own wildfire response plan in terms of actually coordinating all the different pieces that it would require. What does that signal to you in terms of municipal preparedness?
Yeah, I don't want to make comments specifically on your case. However, what I can do is tell you that isn't overly shocking at the end of the day. The reality is there are two different types of firefighting organizations in Canada. There are wildland firefighters, which are those men and women that we see on televisions wearing coveralls. In Alberta, they're yellow, but in other provinces, they're red and brown and purple. Those are men and women that are trained specifically to work on fires in the treat areas. Then you have municipal firefighters like you have in Edmonton, Calgary, Red and our municipalities. We're trained for structural firefighting. Our equipments aren't built or designed to go off-road necessarily. We wear big, heavy personal protective equipment that is not designed for that of a wildland firefighter. So the two have a lot of complementary aspects to one another, but they're different. To your question, I think that every municipality has to look at what is the risk within their own geographical footprint for treat areas, little forested, little parks. I know each of our communities, Calgary, Edmonton, Lethbridge, Red Deer, all have little treat portions of our city. And I know that each community is doing something to look at those risks, understanding what can we do to remove that fire load within our communities. And I'm quite certain that Edmonton will be looking at something if they're not already.
And I'm not surprised to your point that there are other municipalities, or there would be other municipalities that don't have that concrete fire action plan ready. What can we all do so we're better prepared, especially if we're asked to evacuate, leave our homes and leave our communities?
Yeah, I think everybody has to have some own accountability to being prepared. There's a couple of things from the exterior, and no community is immune to risks of fire. And so what can we do around our own properties? Can we remove or reduce combustibles in and around our property? Now's the time to cut your grass, and let's get rid of deadfall in and around our own properties. Those dried leaves that may have lasted throughout the winter now are drying up. Let's get rid of those. On the inside, let's make sure that we have our 72-hour kits. Let's understand that we have our proper medication if we're asked to evacuate. Do we have all of our documents that we need, identification? Let's make sure we talk about our pets. And if we're out in the rural communities, our livestock or our animals, what is our plan to deal with in the event that somebody knocks on your door at 2 p.m. or potentially 2 a.m. and tell you've got 30 minutes, 60 minutes to evacuate? My friends, the days of saying that it won't happen to us, I think, are behind us. We all have to be prepared and understand that it could happen to any of us. So let's prepare now.
Sounds like a good plan. Ken, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
I appreciate the time. To you and your listeners, stay safe, and we will talk again soon.
You as well.